Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Otto Lee, and welcome to our another segment. Today, we are very honored to have special guests to join us. Our friend Rod Diridon Sr. Many of us probably knows the Diridon station in San Jose, and here's the man himself. He has done many wonderful things for our Silicon Valley. He was a former county board of supervisor that served many years, and is truly a leader on our transportation system here. And today we have opportunity to ask him a few questions of how our transportation system, how they end up to be where we are. And thank you again for taking time today, Rod, for joining us.
Otto, it's such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. I'll begin with a little bit of a chide in that, as you know, I was in the Vietnam War for two combat tours, but my rank never got above lieutenant junior grade. And here I am talking to a full commander while I feel like my hand should be creeping up and making a salute all the time.
Well, truly honored to be speaking with you, Rod, and thank you for your service in Vietnam for our country as well. We are very lucky to have you serving all these years in public office in the Santa Clara City Council and the Board of Supervisors for Santa Clara County. As we all know, the area of transportation is one of your expertise, and they even name a train station after you right here called the Diridon Station. So tell us, what have you done actually regarding transportation throughout your years, so the audience will know a little bit more about how our VTA system actually work all together.
Well, Otto, it's a long story. I began by working my way through college as a brakeman on the railroad out of Dunsmuir up by Mount Shasta on the Southern Pacific Railroad, now Union Pacific. After that, I went to Vietnam, came back and started my own company after a couple of years with Lockheed. And then I got into politics and ran for, actually it was the Saratoga City Council. I was vice mayor for several years. And then ran for the Board of Supervisors. While I was on the Saratoga City Council, the county, with the help of Senator Al Ahlquist, the big old tough senator, who I was on his staff for a time, he created the legislation that allowed Santa Clara County to become a transit agency. And so the people voted in Santa Clara County to create the county transit agency under the Board of Supervisors. And so we began the study, the original study. The County Council of Mayors delegated me to become on that study, and then I transferred right over when I became a member of the Board of Supervisors to become the chair of the study because transportation was a brand new area and doing very poorly. The board gave it to the junior member to have the responsibility of the hard area, and I didn't even know enough at that time to realize I was not getting a good deal. And so I chaired all of the transportation programs in the county for the next 20 years.
Wow.
9 different rail construction projects, a lot of rail study boards, the first transportation tax in 1976 in the state of California, half-cent sales tax, and it did pass miraculously. I don't know how, but it passed, and so on and so on. And then when I was, in that process, by the way, we created the first master plan for transportation in the history of Santa Clara County. And it was a multimodal master plan that was done by the best engineers in the world, led by Bechtel Corporation and others. And they came forward with, after 3 years of a couple of $1 million worth of studies, with a master plan that had a master plan for highways. It had a master plan for the transit agency with buses and the light rail system. We called it medium capacity rapid transit at that time. We didn't know what that light rail was. And then with BART and intercity rail coming through the county. And we began construction of those programs. The first light rail line was begun, the Guadalupe Corridor line was begun in 1978. Interesting how we got that money. It was very strange. But we had to get half the money from the federal government. and the other half would come from our tax. And our dear old Congress member, Don Edwards, his roommate and buddy back in Washington, was the chair of the Transportation Committee of the House Public Works and Transportation Committee. And so Don invited him out to play tennis out here, took him on a trip around the valley in a helicopter, convinced him that it was a good idea to earmark $280 million into the bill to cover half the cost of that project. And, that's amazing. And they did it. And so it's funny how friendship makes all the difference in the world, as with you and I.
Thank you.
And so ultimately, we got the master plan. It was approved by the voters as part of the 1976 half-cent sales tax. It's going on forever. And it's it was reapproved every 4 years, reevaluated and reapproved every 4 years up until 1996, when the transit agency was shifted from the county to the Valley Transportation Authority when the cities really took over. The VTA has 5 delegates from San Jose, 5 from the other cities, making it about the same population representation, and 2 from the county. And that from that time forward, they haven't taken the review of the master plan to the voters anymore, but it's still there, and it still has the full program that was created back in 1976. And then I went on over to be appointed by the governors, Gray Davis and Arnold Schwarzenegger, to the High-Speed Rail Authority, which I chaired for many years, and got that started, and then was chair of the U.S. National American Public Transit Association and other kinds of things back in Washington. In fact, the International Transit Association, UITP in Brussels, I was the American vice chair for many, many years, and kept in. More recently, I've been chair of the U.S. High-Speed Rail Association for about 10 years, and have kept that group focused on building California's high-speed rail project, among the others. Right. And I advise Congress and the Board of Supervisors, and the state legislature on the subject of transportation. But other than that, I don't do anything.
Well, I think that's just a small part of what we're going to talk about, because obviously you're a man of many talents and you're very active in so many different things as well. The other areas that I know we've worked together for a long while is about your commitment to help out our environment and climate change. You've been the chair of the League of Conservation Voters locally here for many, many years. 20 years, and truly committed to this issue. So how did that get started for you? Why climate change such a big deal to you?
Well, let me tell you exactly what happened. As I was deeply involved in building transit programs in Santa Clara County and promoting them across the nation, as president of the American Public Transit Association, we sponsored national legislation and created a coalition, a transit coalition across the United States. And so I was going from state to state, giving speeches on how important it was for this legislation. And I began to realize that the rationale for it really wasn't just mobility. This was by 1996, 97, and smog was beginning to be really bad in some areas.
Right.
And
Los Angeles was really horrible.
LA was terrible, and some of the other. By that time, our better pollution control devices on cars were taking effect, but some of the other cities were just awful around the nation and across the world. Right. I had given a speech at that time in Beijing, and you couldn't see the sky. That's right. It looked like the underside of someone's shoe. It was just awful. And so I began to realize that transportation was causing air pollution. Automobile transportation was causing air pollution. Yesterday I was in a meeting, and in the meeting they said 70% It's higher than I had heard, but worldwide 70% of air pollution, global warming gases, are coming from transportation, automobiles.
Oh, the greenhouse gases. Right?
Yeah, automobiles, trains, buses, and airlines. And I began to realize that. So I had been elected to be chair of the National Research Council's transit panel. It was called the Transit Cooperative Research Program.
Right.
And at the end of your time as chair, they give you $100,000 to do a study.
Oh, wow.
Out of respect for me being the chair. And so I said, okay, I want to do a study on combating climate change through sustainable transportation. And they said, oh, we can't do that. We're a transportation agent. We're a transportation research organization, and 90% of our money goes into highways. And I said, well, that's a part of the problem. And so, as you know, we're both good friends with Norm Mineta, who was on his way to becoming Secretary of Transportation at that time. And so I told the folks on the National Research Council, okay, if you don't let me use my $100,000 for that study, I'll go to Secretary Mineta and explain what has happened and ask if he would direct you to. And they said, oh, no, don't do that, you can do it. So I did the study.
That's great.
It was a study done by the best researchers in the United States. And the title of the study was Combating Climate Change Through Sustainable Transportation Policy.
Right.
And the study came out with the conclusion that climate change was being caused primarily by transportation, by burning petroleum fuel in whatever kind of device you were traveling around in. And if we were to stop that, we wouldn't have a problem with climate change.
Right.
And so that caused me to shift in the late 1990s, early 2000s, from a focus on mass transportation only to a focus on fighting climate change with sustainable mass transportation, not petroleum-powered buses, not airlines with crap coming out their great big engines, but rather electrically powered cars, electrically powered trains. The rest of the world, almost all of the trains in the rest of the world are electrically powered, but not in the United States. And that's obnoxious. And the rest of the world thinks it's obnoxious too. And so it's my great crusade right now, and what I have left of my life I'm going to devote completely to trying to persuade major organizations to take this on as a challenge. I'm working now with the International Rotary Clubs, 32,000 chapters, 1.5 million people throughout the world, to persuade them to each create a local Rotary Climate Action Committee to fight against climate change gases.
Right.
And then once we work with Rotary for a while, we'll work with another group.
Right. Good. So, for example, right here in Santa Clara County and through VTA, our buses currently still not yet electrified. And we talk about electrifying Caltrain, and that's supposedly coming through a pipeline through some of the high-speed rail fundings that came through. And of course, high-speed rail is electric. Could you talk a little bit more about what we are doing now for the electrification of Caltrain, and how about the buses?
Otto, in great part because of your leadership back when you were on the city council in Sunnyvale, the VTA has become an environmental group. The new chair of VTA is Nuria Fernandez, and many of the members of VTA, the president of VTA is Cindy Chavez, who is a strong environmentalist, and they're now shifting all of the buses in VTA to either hybrid or electric buses. And they're phasing out all of the old diesel buses and getting rid of them. Of course, the light rail vehicles are electric, and Caltrain will be electric in 2 more years. By 3 more years, 2024, 25, they would expect to be operating electric trains. And so gradually we're phasing out of any mass transportation that's petroleum powered in our county. And I hope we'll be a good example for the other transportation programs around the nation. And you get a lot of credit for that.
Thank you.
You betcha.
Thank you. Now, the other issues I want to bring up is the naming of the BART stations. As we know that just recently, the BART station finally, after many delays in Milpitas and also in San Jose and Berryessa finally just got opened. So we're very excited about that. And there is some word, some rumors that they might name the Berryessa station after Mayor Ron Gonzalez, who of course has been very instrumental, along with Carl Gordino, to bringing the funding to make this dream a reality. What advice would you have for Mayor Ron Gonzalez if he really wants to get that station named after him? What would he have to do?
Well, I think he should do nothing. If you want to have a station named after you, I can tell you that you need to not say a word about it.
Okay.
If other people don't want to do it, you're not going to be able to persuade them to do it. So let the other people decide what they want to do, and they'll do the right thing, because Ron has earned it.
Yes.
You know, let me tell you what happened there. In 1982, Dan McCorkadale, Zoe Lofgren, and I created the Fremont to South Bay Corridor Study Board. And we did the studies and brought a measure back that would have had Santa Clara County join the BART counties and them extend the system to us.
Right.
Santa Clara County approved the result of the study. There was a whole package of tax increases necessary for it, but it was approved. And then it went to the BART board and it failed by one vote.
Oh my goodness.
It came that close in 1988 and 89 maybe. And it was because Nello Bianco, who was a BART member from the East Contra Costa area, didn't want to have us involved because he was afraid we'd take the money that was going to be going to his Pittsburgh-Antioch line. So he voted against it. We had intended to have his vote, and he didn't get it. So the study stopped. And then as I was leaving the board in the early 90s, Ron said he wanted to take it up and see what he could do. And I said, more power to you.
Right.
Go after it. And he did, and he's delivered it.
Oh, wow.
You know, he worked through it. He went to hundreds and hundreds, I know because I had to do it. He went to hundreds and hundreds of public meetings and hearings and guided the study groups and all those kinds of things, to the point where he finally got it not only approved through the various environmental reviews and studies, but also guided it through the construction phases while he was mayor of San Jose. And he really did earn the right to have that station named after him in Berryessa, and it's appropriate because that's right in the middle of his district,
That's right.
of his old district. And so I certainly hope they do name it for him, and I've sent a letter to the editor to the newspaper, which they did run, suggesting that Ron earned it and they ought to do it. And I believe that they're going to, when the time comes, there'll be an action to do it.
That'll be wonderful. Thank you so much. So is there anything that you would like to specifically add about the environment and or transportation that you would advocate for the future of Santa Clara County, of where we are now? Because obviously we still have issues regarding ridership, and of course during COVID, not a lot of people are riding public transportation. We expect that, of course, will pick up hopefully when the COVID shelter in place is being relaxed. What recommendation would you have to able to get more folks to get back on the VTA light rail and the buses in the future?
Well, Otto, you've always been farsighted. You had the vision of a senior naval officer that to look way ahead and plan way ahead. And so when you were mayor of Sunnyvale, you planned ahead. When you were on the VTA board, you planned ahead. And so you know now that COVID, as terrible as it is temporary.
Right.
We're going to have an antidote for it fairly soon, next year and a half. That seems like a long time, but it isn't very long in the history of the valley. And so we shouldn't be planning our future around COVID. We should be planning our future around what's needed for the long-term future. And unfortunately, our government bodies don't plan well for the long-term future. They plan for the next disaster, and they respond to the next disaster, but they don't plan for the long-term future. The long-term future, this valley has two options. We can continue to sprawl out the way we have for so many years, and it will destroy the valley. You'll have ticky-tacky houses up to the top of the ridge lines on both east and west, just like San Francisco. It's covered with these little cookie cutter houses, and there's going to be no way to commute anymore because you're going to have so many cars on the road that you're not going to be able to get up and down the road. And you can't serve that kind of a population with mass transportation because it's all too spread out. So we've got to immediately stop urban sprawl, and that's what we're doing with a mass transit system. So what we need to do is to build out our 140 miles of light rail, complete the high-speed rail systems in from the Central Valley, so that you have an opportunity of going from Fresno to downtown San Jose in 51 minutes, and have breakfast on the way, instead of 3 hours per direction driving a dangerous, polluting car, and then we need to. The key here, the element that we're missing in America, especially in California, is we need to infill on top of and around train stations. So every time you have a train station with a parking lot, you ought to build a high-rise little village. We call them transit villages, or trandominiums. Trandominiums or transit villages. We need to build those on top of the train stations, every train station and parking lot. Just put a big podium over the top of the train station parking lot, keep the dirty stuff down below, and above that put grass. And out of that grassed-in area, 20, 30, 40 acres over the top of some of our stations and parking. Put high-rise towers for condominiums and townhouses and rental property, and make sure that 10, 15, 20% of those are saved for low-income people. And don't put them all in one spot. You don't want to create a ghetto. No. Scatter the low-income programs up and down the system so that it
to blend into the rest of the
so that not all of the burden of taking care of the low-income people falls in one area. And if we did that, we could house the growth for the valley for the next 100 years on top of those infill trandominiums or transit villages. On top, we have 62 stations right now in Santa Clara County that we could be developing on top of. And not just 4, 5, or 6, 7 stories, but 20 or 30 stories. And that's the way to go in the future. And the tax revenue for the school districts and the cities would go up dramatically, because all that property is out of tax base now, and the pressure for urban sprawl would be reduced dramatically. So that's where we need to go. And I know you'll have a say in that when you're on the County Board of Supervisors. And I know where you'll come out of that, and you need to have the courage to know that you're doing the right thing.
Thank you.
That's one of the precepts of the Legal Conservation Voters and the Sierra Club for the region. And I believe it's a very, very right thing to do. The rest of the world is showing us how to do it. And unless we do it, we can't meet the climate change goals that will keep us from going beyond the point of no return in 10, 15 years.
Right. And I think the fixed, the mixed usage of these parcels makes a lot of sense. And we're not really unique or novel about this. Major cities around the world have done it. I mean, New York City certainly is one where the subway is extremely well used by most folks, and most people living in New York City, especially Manhattan, don't own a car. And I think if for us to go to that level, I think we certainly need to more heights. And as you know, I grew up in Hong Kong, so high density to me is not 5 or 6 levels. I think 20 plus stories is something that we're familiar with, and I think certainly the technology is there to make that a reality, right? So I think people just have to be more adaptable, understanding that condominium living is something that is not only acceptable, it's actually even more comfortable.
Yeah, let me stress something for your neighbors that might be afraid of density.
Right.
If you don't put the density on top of the train stations, remember these train stations are all buffered from the community.
Correct.
They all have big boulevards, so if you don't put them on top of the train stations, it's buffered from the community. Then that density is going to spill out into the community. Right. and it's going to cause general density in the overall community. It's starting already by everybody creating a granny house in their backyard.
That's right.
And
They can't find parking on the streets.
that's right. That's right. You won't find parking, and it causes a general feeling of crampedness in the community. But if you put them on top of transit, then people don't need as much parking because they can use transit to get to work and home.
Exactly.
And of course it cuts down the air pollution dramatically.
All right, good. I think
Well, let me make a comment. Some people have asked me why I'm supporting you for the Board of Supervisors. And as you know, I was a member of the Board of Supervisors for 20 years, so I know what the job is. Your primary job is going to be having foresight and thinking longer distance in the future than the cities and others around you, because they're shorter term programs, but also getting along with your cities in a way that creates cooperation, both city to city, working with the County Board of Supervisors and the various services you provide to cities, but also in terms of making sure that all of what you do has a good impact on the cities. Now, you can do that, I know, because I've seen you have the experience that nobody else running in this race has. You've been a mayor. The mayor is the toughest job in politics. If you can be a mayor and keep everybody happy, well, you can't keep everybody happy. But if you can work with everybody in a collegial way to make progress, you're halfway there. So if you can carry that experience as the mayor of a big city in Sunnyvale over to the Board of Supervisors and use that experience to work with the other mayors that you're going to have responsibility for. You're working with how much?
15 cities, right, in the city.
But you represent 4?
At least 3. Yeah, Milpitas, Sunnyvale, and part of
San Jose. So I believe you can do that job, and with experience that is absolutely invaluable. And you also have the demeanor. When they make you an officer in the United States Navy, they make you take an oath. And that oath, you and I both took it. That oath still weighs heavily on me. And I know it does on you too. And I know that you'll carry that oath right on over into your public service. And I have confidence that you're going to do the kind of job for the people of Santa Clara Valley that you did in fighting for us in Iraq.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, and certainly with the upcoming deficit that so many of our agencies are facing, I used to joke to people, why do I want to run for this job? I mean, as we know, serving on the government body when the economy is good, when you have surpluses, it's easy. You're like Santa Claus. The hard time is when you serve when you are running in the deficit, and where do you find more money to maintain the level of service? Because after all, the county is the safety net for the most vulnerables. And it's unfortunate to say, but I think it's going to be a lot of pain to come in the years ahead after this COVID nightmare that we're suffering right now. So I certainly appreciate your strong support and your passion and your vision that you have got us to where we are right now. But certainly there's a lot more hard work ahead indeed.
Well, Otto, I've watched you for a lot of your life. Oddly enough, I was in the Hong Kong harbor in 1964, 65, 66 from time to time, coming in off of patrol. And I imagine you might have been in the area at that time as a little kid. But I know that the challenges you faced as a mayor of Sunnyvale in seeing homeless, seeing the difficulties the police have in doing a good job and doing it fairly, with your public safety officers in Sunnyvale, and working with the people in the community that needed special assistance of one sort or another. And I know that you're going to carry that sensitivity and that organizational skill right on over to the Board of Supervisors and do a great job.
Thank you so much for your support. I'm truly honored and humbled to earn your strong support from the very beginning. When you told me right before I even announced running for this job over a year and a half ago. And again, thank you so much for your friendship and your guidance. And I still have a lot more to learn. And thank you so much for your time today speaking with us. And again, it's truly an honor to be speaking with you and to the audience. And thank you, Rod.
Oh, thank you, and thanks for your service on the Legal Conservation Voters Board, too.